enough to join us. Curtis, good to see you.
Pleasure.
And I think you have said a number of times, that you can never let your guard down. You always have to be vigilant. But, there's a whole young generation, Curtis, who weren't even born then, don't even know about it outside of history books. Does that worry you?
It isn't so much our generation. It's the jihadist generation. Newborn, young, idealistic, wanting to strike at us a third time. In some cave, it could be in Yemen, it could be in Iraq, it could be now in Afghanistan, where they all have been reinvigorated. And they're going to look to us in New York City, where we've defunded the police, where we see domestic terrorists who rioted, looted, shot, no arrests. Basically, the streets at times turned over to a criminal element, and they're going to see that.
Well, you've argued that crime is a far bigger immediate issue right now, right? Yeah. And it's still pretty bad.
It is, but the number one issue is a police department that has to protect us from an international attack. Remember, it got so bad, you had former police commissioner Kelly here, that they decided to set up their own outpost under the Bloomberg administration, where they assigned police officers to Jordan, to other ports of call in the Middle East, because they couldn't necessarily trust the federal government, which at times would sit on information instead of share it. So I don't believe we're as vigilant as we should be.
Well, if you became mayor, Curtis, and you've talked about crime quite a bit. That is a more dominant issue than people wanting to return to the city after the pandemic, worried about the spikes in cases. They're worried about the spikes in crime.
Well, look, we have an Anti-Terrorism Task Force that is the best that policing in the world have done. But they've been depleted because of retirements, early retirements. They've been defunded. So we don't have as many personnel dedicated day in, day out.
We don't have as many personnel even to handle the everyday thief or the guy who's going nuts and shooting up in Times Square.
But that's why the priority in this election is not only to refund the police, but hire more police. We need a minimum of 38,000 police officers just to attend to the day-to-day policing of this huge city of 5 boroughs. But in addition, we have to buff up the number of experienced men and women who are on 3 separate terrorist task force that are run by the NYPD. One is a joint task force with the FBI and NYPD. The other 2 are run by the NYPD.
Do they talk to each other? Do they communicate with each other?
They do.
Yeah.
But unfortunately,
you worry about outside that.
Exactly. And we know that there are embedded individuals here within our city who are sending information back to whoever the shot callers are there. And it will make us vulnerable if we don't realize on this 20th anniversary. Look what just happened in Afghanistan. They saw that as a total sign of weakness. It's almost like Clark Kent, right? Instead of Superman, the United States was exposed to kryptonite, and we cut, we ran, we left. So now they're empowered.
That is galvanized and these various terrorist groups, because you always hear, well, don't worry about the Taliban and they're fighting with ISIS-K, but I just see a lot of bad guys in the same country free to do what they want.
They may be fighting amongst one another, no doubt, but they're united in one cause, and they all spew the same rhetoric. Death to the evil Satan America, death to the little Satan Israel. They all share that in solidarity.
They hate us a hell of a lot more than they have bicker with each other. Exactly. So let me get a sense from you about the future here in New York, and obviously 20 years ago a lot of people thought people wouldn't come back to downtown, let alone the city. They did. But how would you as mayor make that happen?
Well, you have to provide the public safety. If you don't have safe streets, safe subways, safe parks, safe schools, people are not going to return. And remember, your number one duty is to keep the people here instead of them joining the exodus to those states south of the Mason-Dixon line. So many New Yorkers that I talk to have fled Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Texas, Tennessee, and the big one, Florida. And guess what? They're not coming back. So now we've got to sort of rally up our residents to improve, not to move. That's the way I was brought up in the streets of Brooklyn. And that has to be our battle cry: improve, don't move. And that means we have to deal with the normal crime, and we really have to ramp up our efforts, because I'm telling you, the terrorists out there, they're salivating. They want another shot at us, and the third time for them in their minds is the charm, because they're going to go on the Paradise Express to their heaven if they become martyrs. We don't want to die.
Yeah, so
but they want to die for a
cause. The 93 World Trade Center attack, and obviously this one.
Yes.
Do you think New York then remains a target? It's a big target. A lot of people in New York say, okay, we've had our nightmare, now other cities, and they've seen it since, in Paris and Spain and everybody, that maybe we're not a target anymore. What do you tell them?
Listen to the previous terrorists who have been arrested. As you mentioned, the first terrorist attack, 92, Sheikh Rahman was the inspiration for that. And then obviously Al-Qaeda. Khalid Mohammed was the mastermind of that, even though it was Osama bin Laden, the shot caller. They chose New York because it's the epicenter of capitalism in the world, which they despise. And because it's where more Jews live than anywhere else. They've told us this over and over. This is their mantra. This is their dogma. And they don't mind dying for their cause. So we have to man up and woman up and be prepared to meet them with equal, if not greater force, to not only deter them, but to stop them the moment they attempt another attack, which is going to come. I tell you, I feel it in the marrow of my bones.
Are you and Eric Adams going to debate?
Yes, we'll have two separate debates towards the end of October. Obviously, public safety is the primary issue on the minds of the Democrats, Republicans, and the independents.
Has he agreed to this debate?
He has no choice.
He's sitting on a nice poll lead. He might just think, why should I bother?
He has no choice because he's accepted public funds. But the difference is that this Republican, Curtis Sliwa, has gone into neighborhoods where they haven't seen a Republican since Abraham Lincoln on a $5 bill. And I have that street cred, Neil. You know that. Subways and streets is where I do my politics.
Does it bug you, though, and I mentioned this before, because you're an impressive candidate and you state your mind, people have no doubt where you're coming from, but you're kind of like the Rodney Dangerfield of politics. I know this is a heavily Democratic city, but we've had Republican mayors, we've had Republican governors. George Pataki was on it long ago. Why did Republican candidates still get that?
Neil, of course I get no respect. But did I ever get respect when I started the Guardian Angels?
No,
I was called a Hell's Angel, a vigilante. Did I get respect when the Gottis and the Gambinos had me shot 5 times? People thought that I was losing my mind, and yet I superseded that.
They tried to kill you and they couldn't do it.
That's right. They attacked me twice.
That's right.
Look, I'm used to being David versus Goliath. Never go to sleep on Curtis Sliwa. And there's a lesson to be learned there. Never go to sleep on these enemies of America, because it doesn't matter how many generations, they hope to eventually strike us again. And we have to, if necessary, preemptively hit them. And if they strike us, we have to hit them with greater force than they're coming at us with.
Curtis, great seeing, because you're right. I mean, a lot of people say we might stop thinking of them, but boy, they never stop thinking of us.
That's our priority number one. As much as street crime is my privy, number one is to keep America safe from terrorism, and it starts with our NYPD, these heroes in New York City.
Curtis, in the meantime, good luck coming out of your shell. Seems to be working. So thank you very, very much. Curtis Sliwa, he is the Republican candidate for mayor of New York. We did put out a call to Eric Adams, his Democratic opponent. Does he return, Jenna, our calls anymore, or just say, whatever, we're doing laundry or whatever? Okay, well, anyway, we don't bite here. Curtis could say we don't bite here, but you're welcome. I want to continue going to the reading of the names here, and we'll tune you in on what's next.